What's up, everybody?
What it is?
What is going on, my fellow fishermen?
It is Tuesday.
It is. And I think we're going to enjoy this episode because I know I'm going to learn a lot on this one, and this is something I definitely need to get better on. But without spoiling it, what are we talking about tonight?
We are talking about probably the second most expensive technique next to big swim baits, and that is jerkbaits.
We
Suspending jerkbaits.
And we have a lot of them.
There's a lot of
jerk baits in this room right now.
We like to jerk it a lot.
There's probably a solid mortgage payment worth of jerkbaits in this room right now.
There's definitely
Yeah.
Chad's monthly boat payment is in this, is probably on this table, not even including what I have in this box.
I've got more than Chad's monthly boat payment in my box.
So, like I said, like
Did
we
you look
all
at those
said,
boxes that I have?
like we said, jerk baits. We're gonna get
Chad
into
can pay
it.
my mortgage with what's in his box.
We're gonna get into where, why, how, and all the intricacies of jerk baits. Definitely comment. Let us know what you guys think because, like I said, this is something that I would like to get better on. I'd like to start off by saying this. Though. We were just talking about this earlier. I've probably caught in my life 4 or 5 bass over 7 pounds, right? If we say 4 bass over 7 pounds, 2 of those fish have come on jerk baits. So I really like jerk baits because when it works, you get a big bite. Like I caught a 7 even in Lake Moomaw, a lake that I don't know that lake very well. Didn't even get longer in that tournament. I'll come back to that later. That was
beat by a smallmouth.
Yeah, I got a 7-pound largemouth got beat out by a smallmouth by a 7-1 whatever the hell it was smallmouth in the tournament. Dude, I like, and then that fish lost to an 8.5-pound largemouth in the same tournament. I was so upset. But anyway,
Jerkbaits are they're definitely a good way to catch big fish, and there's a lot of ways to utilize them. I've caught a lot of big smallmouth on jerkbaits, a lot of 4-pound plus smallmouth on jerkbaits between Conowingo and the Susquehanna and out in Deep Creek, just in various places. Caught a lot of big smallmouth on jerkbaits. Caught a lot of big largemouth on jerkbaits too. Nothing massive like Tony's caught, but I've got a lot of good bags on jerkbaits and kind of just want to share that knowledge and where I like to fish them, when I like to fish them, what time of year, what kind of jerkbaits. So we're going to cover all that tonight.
The jerkbait, to me, I feel like so when you're talking about the time of year, not that we're going to jump into time of year right now, but just like topic. So jerkbait is a wide thing. Like you can throw jerkbaits in the spring. You can throw jerkbaits in the winter. You could throw them in the summer. I think one of the jerkbaits is one of those baits that can be utilized, proven by KVD,
one of those
at all times.
So yeah, and a lot of that depends on where you're fishing. It's really good, it's really good clear water bait, and in clear water, absolutely you can catch them pretty much year round. Sometimes in not clear water, there was a Bassmaster Elite Series that was one on jerkbait in it was in Texas, I believe. And it was post spawn, early summer, and it was one on a jerkbait.
I think it was
a very big jerkbait.
Was it Lake Fork?
No, it
A
wasn't.
couple years ago.
Fork was one in the fall. That was in the fall. Now that actually brings up something that has kind of opened a new window to jerkbaits, and that's forward-facing sonar. So forward-facing sonar has really opened up the jerkbait, and that was Patrick Walters that won that tournament on Lake Fork, specifically using forward-facing sonar to target individual fish with a jerkbait. One of the reasons it's so good for that is because you control the depth. So once you know what depth those fish are at, you can get it down to that depth. They suspend. It stays at that depth. It's not like a crankbait where you reel down and it'll float back up. That jerkbait, you can just keep it right in front of their face on that forward-facing sonar. So it's pretty cool. I got to do that a little bit in Texas when I was down there. This spring, it's really cool how you can just put that jerkbait out there, get it down to a certain depth, and we'll talk about that, how to get your jerkbaits to certain depths. But get it out there, and you can just keep it there, and you can just watch the fish come up behind it, watch them react to it. Whether twitch it a little faster, twitch it a little slower, longer pauses, but that forward-facing sonar has really opened up a new window into jerkbait fishing for different times of year, because traditionally jerk baits are cold water baits.
It's an expensive way to throw a jerkbait specifically if you're just going to use forward-facing sonar.
Well, yeah, but it's just a great way to target those offshore suspending fish.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean,
You know, it's
absolutely.
You know, it's such a good way to do that. When those fish are, when I'm talking about post spawn to or like early fall when those fish are suspending. A lot of the fish in lakes, not so much in our tidal waters, but in lakes, those fish are going to move out over deeper water and they're going to suspend, and then during the day, and then they'll move up shallow to feed in the mornings, and then they'll just drop back up and they'll suspend over a creek channel or something like that. And they're out over 25 feet of water suspending at 8, and a jerkbait's a really good way to target them. So, like I was saying, the jerkbait's really, traditionally a cold water bait, and that's when I like to throw a jerkbait.
What's up, Pete?
Anything below, say, once the water gets into the 60s, all the way down to one of the best days that I've ever had on a jerkbait was 37-degree water. I love wintertime fishing, and a jerkbait is one of my main tools that I use in wintertime.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I love going out in December, January when it's absolutely freezing out, and as long as the water's not hard, you can usually catch them on a jerkbait. Very specific conditions that I look for in that, but you can really whack them on a jerk. Usually, I can always catch a couple on a jerkbait, but there's certain conditions are better than others, and I'm not going to get too much into that. I'll let you guys figure that out on your own. But right now, we're going to talk about the different types of jerkbaits, the different ways to fish them, different brands, and let's go through that. So let's start with what's your favorite jerkbait? I know what Tony's is.
My favorite jerkbait is I kind of teetered along the two of them, but I like the Rapala jerkbaits a lot. A couple reasons for it. They come with pretty decent hooks on them. It's got VMC hooks, so you don't lose a lot of fish on them. They're pretty affordable. I think they're one of the cheaper jerkbaits.
Yeah, $70.
Yeah, like $7-8. They're pretty reasonable, and they have good action. I know there are lots of guys that are very successful with jerkbaits that throw them. So a couple I have here, and I'll pull out. And Rapala makes 2 types of jerkbaits. Now this one that I'm going to pull out here, this is actually, I call it a 7-pounder in Lake Moonmont, Virginia, on this exact jerkbait. That's a clown color Rapala X-Wrap jerkbait. It's the 4 to 6 foot diving model. I think it's the X-Wrap 07. The paint is worn off. That says it. But that I like that jerkbait a lot. So and then you have what's called the Shadow Wrap jerkbait. Now this is a relatively new jerkbait. So Paul's actually holding the deep model, and if you want to turn around, you can see the difference in the lip. So I'm holding the shallow model, and Paul's holding the deep model. Now the shallow model you can fish anywhere from 3 foot or less. The deep model you can fish anywhere from that 6 to 10 foot range, depending on your line and setup.
Well, the nice thing though, it's good that that you mentioned the Shadow Wrap, because the nice thing about a Shadow Wrap is it's not a suspending jerkbait; it's a slow sinking jerkbait. So you can, if you fish it slow enough, I mean, you can get. I fish this in 10 to 12 feet, and I can bang the bottom on 10 to 12 feet, and that's one of the things I really like to do. The Shadow Wrap being a slow sink is we'll talk a little bit about more when to utilize those, but that's a pretty unique feature in a jerkbait.
The last jerkbait that Rapala makes is, this one's also relatively new. It just came out a few years ago, but it's called the Ripstop, and it has a very similar shape to the Shadow Wrap. It has a little bit more of a taper on the back end than your traditional Shadow Wrap, and it's hard to see here because of the hook, but there's a little bit of a fin here on this back of the body. You can kind of maybe see that a little bit. I can't really get the camera to pick it up, but there is a little bit of a fin there on the back of that bait. And what that does, there you go. And what that does is that when you jerk the bait, as soon as your line has relieved its tension, that bait will stop. So it's a much quicker, a little bit more erratic action. I haven't put the time in on these baits yet, so I can't really talk about how great they are, if they are great. But it's just a little bit different presentation. But if you're not really familiar with jerkbaits and you want to get in them, I would highly recommend you start with Rapala. Like as Paul said, $7-8 bait.
Yeah, maybe $9 for a shadow wrap. X wrap's like $7-8. Shadow wrap's like 8 or 9.
And they're very, I mean, and you can definitely catch a good bag of fish when the conditions are right on the shadow wrap. But there's certain days, like it's kind of like the jackhammer versus thunder cricket debate. There's days when they're going to eat the mega bass. There's days when they're going to eat the shadow wrap. So if you're getting into jerkbaits, I would definitely give those a shot.
Chad, what's your favorite? I know that's a silly. I already know the answer to this. So
the only jerkbait that that was about to be a lie straight out of my mouth. One of the only jerkbaits I own is a Mega Bass Vision 110. I just recently purchased some evergreen jerkbaits. I got a couple, like 2 or 3 evergreen jerkbaits now. But my favorite jerkbait and the only jerkbait that I have, and this is just one box, is just.
He's got 2 boxes.
I have 2 boxes, and the other one's even bigger. It's just Mega Bass Vision 110s, and then everything else is all Mega Bass. There's some crankbaits in there, and the 3 that you see that aren't Mega Bass are Tyler's UMA crankbaits, and those are better than Mega Bass. I said it on camera. You heard it here.
Okay. So I kind of set you guys up for that because my favorite jerkbait is the one I need. Is the one I need for that situation. So, like Chad has all Mega Bass. He's got some 110, some 110 plus ones, 110 plus twos,
juniors,
juniors, various sizes and depths. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different brands of jerkbaits laying here. Because they all do different things.
Because
they have different actions, they have different depths, they have different float rates, different sink rates, and that's really important with jerkbait fishing. So it's some of the ones that I fish. This is a Spro mixed stick. Of course, I got the Mega Bass because they're just fish catchers. Like Tony mentioned, the X Wrap. This is the 6 cents. I can't remember what they call it. Provoke. This is the 6 cents Provoke. Kind of a sick paint job on that. It's got like these scales on it.
Like a Mega Bass.
It's got a little fatter body. The Berkeley Stunna and the Rapala Shadow Wrap. So I have a lot of different baits that I fish because they all behave differently. So let's start with depth. So you'll look at jerkbaits and you'll see, that they have different bills. So let's just look at Mega Bass. So here's 2 Mega Bass jerkbaits. So this is your regular Vision 110, and this is the 110 deep. Notice the bill design. So that's going to do 2 things. One, your depth. So obviously this one's going to run a little more shallower than this one, just like a crankbait. You got a bigger bill, it runs deeper, right? What it also does is it changes the angle of the crankbait. So a 110 will pretty much sit at about that angle when you stop it, give or take. We're right about like that. The 110 plus 1 sits a little more nose down. And you may not think that's important. That's incredibly important with jerkbait fishing, especially in cold water, because the fish are looking at that bait for a long time. So you really have to understand how your jerkbaits sit. If I'm catching them on a 110 plus 1, and let's say I break this off, and I want to pull up, I pull out the Shadow Wrap because it's another deep diving jerkbait. I may never get bit on this. It could be the same color. I may never get bit on this because of the way it orients in the water. So the Shadow Wrap is will sit in the water a lot more level rather than nose down like the Vision 110.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of different actions and styles, I guess, with the jerkbaits. The mixed stick is a little more suspending than a mega bass, so it'll hold. A mega bass is technically a slow floating jerkbait. While they suspend, a lot of it depends on water temperature, things like that. It'll pretty much suspend, but it'll just very, very slowly it'll float to the top. If you ever break one off, if you wait long enough, it'll float to the top. If it's not in a fish's mouth or hung on something.
Right.
Where the mixed stick is a much more suspending. I mean, it will just absolutely just sit there. It will not float back up. So you don't. You got to pay attention to those different actions. The only way to really know is go out and fish them. Like you just have to go out and fish them, tie different ones on. Go out if you want. Go out for a day, and just take nothing but jerk baits and just start. You get a nice clear water day. Just start throwing your jerk baits and see what the actions are. See what which ones are more erratic, which ones walk side to side, which ones come more straight through the water, and you have to know how your jerk bait works. Obviously, like if you're like Chad and you fish a mega bass, pretty easy. You always know how it's going to work because if I take a 110+1 in one color and I tie on a different color, it's going to work exactly the same, right? So, but sometimes they just won't eat it, or you'll notice they're not eating it well. You're catching them on the back hook. Kevin, that's not a great statement because there's a lot more to jerk baits than a Vision 110.
Yeah, but the Vision 110 is the best one.
The Vision 110 is very good in a lot of situations.
It's the best one.
It's not the best. I will not say that it's the best one because again,
it's the best one.
The best one is the one that works for those conditions. So like I said, it's all condition based. It's all what the fish want, especially in the wintertime. Wintertime, we all know wintertime's the toughest time to fish. It's also one of my favorite times to fish. Yep. And that's where
on my ass in front of the fireplace.
That's where your jerk bait, really knowing your different actions on a jerk bait. Now, if you're in this, you get that early spring when they're first starting to feed, you can almost throw any jerk bait out there. And the Vision 110 it's got such a good action. That early spring bite with the Vision 110 is just money. Get into the fall, money. Get into the wintertime, good sometimes, not so good the others. Really, a lot of it depends on the fish. So I think it's always good to have a variety of jerk baits, so that you can adapt to those changing conditions. So let's talk about a little bit. We talked about different jerk baits, what our favorites are, and some of the brands that we fish. I'm going to talk a little bit about when I fish a jerk bait. So I really have one is obviously cold water. When the water's cold, like I said, from 65 down to 35. That's so your cooler water temperatures. But you can also fish it. A jerk bait's really good when on high pressure days. So if you're fishing you can be fishing in the summertime, you get a high pressure day, jerk bait can be really good. Where, that fast action of a crankbait, they're not hitting it. Maybe they're not committing to a crankbait. Throw on a jerk bait. Try throwing a jerk bait out there because, a lot of times that pause, you can just that little bit of pause and with it sitting there will help them commit. So that's kind of one of my little tidbits for the day is, high pressure days. It's not just a cold water bait like we were saying earlier. You can fish them in the summertime. You can fish them around grass edges.
Fish them fast, fish them slow.
Deep creek, I
fish them high, fish them low.
Doesn't matter what time of year I'm in Deep Creek. I always have a jerk bait tied on because it's got clear water, which is really key for a jerk bait. You can catch them on a jerk bait in dirty water, but for the most part, I like throwing a jerk bait in clear water. I want the fish to see the bait, not feel the bait. Like crankbait, a lot of crankbait bites are going, they're using lateral line. Doesn't matter if the water's dirty, water's clean, they're going to eat a crankbait. Jerk bait is more of a visual bite. So that's what I'm looking for, that cleaner water where, they can really see that bait. So clean water, you get some grass lines. Man, you take a jerk bait and you throw, if you're in a lake, like I mentioned, Deep Creek, in the summertime, you can get on some of those deeper grass edges and just work that jerk bait on those deeper grass edges, and it's just killer. Same thing around here. I mean, you can get into some. I mean, you can throw a jerk bait. You can throw a jerk bait on the flats. Ain't nothing wrong with throwing a jerk bait on the flats.
Need a beer? Yes.
If you find the right water, if you find clean water, don't be afraid to experiment. You can throw them in shallow water. Just make sure that, again, that goes with knowing what your jerk bait does. Knowing how deep you can fish it. This is a shadow wrap shad by Rapala. That's a slow floating jerk bait. I can fish this super shallow. I can fish this jerk bait in 2 feet of water over top of grass, no problem. I can fish it in grass. Notice it's got a really, really small bill. That bill comes through grass really well. So I can fish this and, I'm not afraid to throw this in grass. May out on the flats, I'll throw this out there on the flats in the grass when the fish are spawning.
Would you say that the jerk bait is more of a largemouth or smallmouth bait?
Both.
Same
100%.
time as the year?
Same time of the year. Smallmouth, it's a little better for smallmouth in the warmer water. For some reason, I don't know why, but smallmouth tend to eat a jerkbait better in warmer water than a largemouth will. Largemouth, I think they want that fast. You're looking for that fast reaction bite, where smallmouth are mostly visual feeders anyway, so they're looking at the bait. They can see that bait up there and coming over top of them. They might be in 10 feet of water or something like that. And they see that bait coming over top of them. It's a little more visual, where your largemouth are, in that warmer water, maybe sitting a little deeper. They're sitting on the bottom, and you're getting those bites by pulling that crankbait, right by their face. Where the jerkbait's not quite as good, because they're not actively feeding.
Right.
They're just kind of hanging out. Now, with that being said, we talked about forward facing sonar. A jerkbait is a really good bait for suspending fish. So largemouth in the summertime, absolutely. It's a great bait for a largemouth in the summertime, especially on lakes when they go suspend over creek channels in the middle of the day. You can throw a jerkbait at them and catch the heck out of them. But it's hard to do that without forward facing sonar, because you're going to end up fishing a lot of dead water.
Right.
And there's just too much water to be able to cover doing that. That's why it was never really an effective method until forward-facing sonar came out. Now you're seeing jerkbaits win a lot of tournaments in different times of year than our traditional, what we would traditionally think of as, a jerkbait season. Because jerkbait season to me is like October to March. Like that's my jerkbait season. That's when I catch the most fish on jerkbaits. So from October to October, when that water starts to cool down up and until they get ready to spawn. That's the time that I really throw jerkbaits. I haven't got into the whole forward facing sonar thing, so surprisingly.
It's funny, Dan, you want to know what actually got me into, just convinced me that the Mega Bass Division 110 was the best jerkbait on the market? One day I went out rock fishing with Gromster on the Susquehanna, and I didn't know any better, honestly. Like, I was just getting into fishing, really. And I had one of those jerkbaits that I swear to God, the first Mega Bass jerkbait that I ever got, I got in a lucky tackle box.
Nice.
Wow. Hell yeah. That's a score.
That's worth more than the tackle box.
It was worth more than the whole thing, yeah. And I got more baits with it. But I tied it on and I threw it for rockfish. And I think I caught like 2 or 3 rockfish to every one of his on that Mega Bass. And he was throwing the OG Rapala Shadow Wrap. And just destroyed rockfish on this 110. And ever since that day, no joke, I was just like, this is the best jerkbait ever made, and I will only ever throw this jerkbait for the rest of my life. And I have stayed true to that. I only had one of them at the time, by the way, and now I own like 40, and I don't even throw them.
Throw them for 1 month a year.
Yeah, I throw them for like 1 month a year. Each jerkbait's like $20. I got like 40 of them.
25.
Is that
Except the juniors are 20 though.
a lot of them that I
25.
purchased? I got on like for like good deals though. So I didn't pay 25 for each one of them, but
So
god
We'll
damn,
talk-
$25 for a fucking jerkbait.
20, yeah, the 110s and 110 plus ones are 25. The juniors are 20.
Glad I got my collection up when I did.
So
Thanks,
that's
Gordon.
so again, colder water. That's like my time of year. I will throw a jerkbait around grass a lot. So even in the summer, if you find some deeper grass where you can you can fish a jerkbait, I like fishing a jerkbait around grass. I love fishing a jerkbait around grass, but mostly I'm throwing a jerkbait around hard cover, rock. Not just hard, not like hard cover. I'm not throwing around wood. Do not throw a jerkbait in wood. Not a good combination.
No, no.
Especially if it's a mega bass, because you're going to lose it and it's going to hurt. So I'm throwing it around a rock. I'm looking for wintering holes. I'm looking for places where they're pushing shad up against riprap. So a lot of riprap, a lot of like chunk rock flats. I'm generally fishing a jerkbait in that I like to fish, in that I'll say 5 to 10 foot zone. That's where I find the jerkbait really does the best, is in that little bit deeper water. I feel like in shallower water I can throw a square bill and something like that, and usually I can fish more efficiently. So usually in shallower water, but we're going to talk about that because I've learned something about jerkbait fishing. But
I was gonna say that 4 foot range down to like 10 foot range was.
yeah, 4 to 10, 5 to 10,
Yeah.
somewhere in that range.
I think your standard 110 is like what is it, 4 to 6 foot diver.
So you can get a standard 110 on 12-pound line. Will go to 8 feet.
Just the normal.
The regular 110. Or I'm sorry, the 110 plus one.
Yeah, the 110 plus 1 will go to 8 feet.
The a regular
I
110
think it's
will go about
6.
5. Yeah, it goes about 5 foot on 12-pound line. I tested these out with fishing with my buddy down in Texas this year.
Mhm.
He's got live scope, so I was able to like
Really
toss it out
watch
there and watch it and like watch the depth that it would run. So I could figure out, okay, well, 12-pound line, this runs this depth, and
Mhm.
so the 110 plus 1, I can get that at 8 feet. I can get this one down to like 4.5. I think was where I could get the regular 110 on 12-pound line. So, and that's what you have to know, is how deep your jerkbaits go, because you typically, in most scenarios, you don't want to fish them right on the bottom. You want them to be a little bit above the bottom, so that or a little bit above the fish.
Right.
You don't want them to be below the fish. Largemouth, smallmouth, both the same. They'll almost always feed up. So you want to be able to, have it just over their heads, where they can see it. Think about it. Bass's eyes are kind of on the top of its head. It's looking this way. It's not looking down like this. And it can't
It's looking like this. It's like,
unless it goes like this, nose down. It's not really seeing what's on the bottom. That's why if you ever, you watch enough videos of, a fish eating like crayfish or eating a jig or something like that, that's something that's on the bottom, you'll watch them nose down on it, and they'll they'll look at it before they suck it up, because they look up. It's just how their eyes are built. So you want to keep it, if that fish is on the bottom, you might want to keep it 6 inches off the bottom, so that it's like right in front of their face. Or if they're suspended in 5 feet, you might want to throw this that runs 4.5 or 4 feet. So making sure that you know how deep your jerkbaits run, super important, because if you don't put it in the right zone, the fish aren't going to eat it. And that's pretty much true with any bait.
right.
But you can get with a crankbait or something like that, you can get away with it a little more, that you have the vibration, and you have a lot more, so you're going to get that fish's attention. So that fish might, if that crankbait's coming across the bottom underneath of them, they're gonna hear it coming. They might look down and still eat it. with a jerkbait, you don't have any of that vibration. You're really relying on a sight bite. They're seeing the bait and they're going to eat it. So that's my second tip of the night is make sure that you keep it above the bottom in most scenarios. Now, there's
jerkbaits don't deflect cover very well, so
they deflect off a rock pretty well. But it's also a good way to break bills.
Yeah.
So in others, and I keep that as a, don't use that as like gospel, because certain scenarios, as the water gets colder, I want that jerkbait closer to the bottom because the fish aren't going to come up as much. They're not going to use as much energy. So you really want it down at their level. One of the things one of the jerkbaits that I love to fish in the wintertime is that shadow wrap deep, because it's a slow sinking jerkbait. So I can throw it out there and on, I'm 15 to 20 second pauses. This bait is just kind of sitting like this on the bottom, and it almost will suspend on the bottom. So it'll come down and like the hooks will hit and it'll just kind of sit there. So it'll just kind of like rest on the bottom, and then you twitch it and you're just kind of like, you're bumping almost like a crankbait, but you're just bumping it along, letting it pause, and it just kind of sits there on the bottom. So the colder the water gets, the less action I want in my jerkbait.
How do you know when you're fishing a deep jerkbait that your jerkbait is all the way down? If you're trying to fish it slow, how do you get that bait down to the depth that you want it to?
So I'm always trying to fish the max depth of whatever jerkbait that I'm throwing.
Right.
So it doesn't matter what time of year I'm fishing. The first thing that I do with a jerkbait is my first three, pumps on the rod. Mm-hmm. Let's see what I did there. Are going to be as hard as possible.
Your first 3 jerks.
So I'm going to throw that deep jerkbait out. If I'm throwing that 110, I'm just going to crack it like 3 times. Mm-hmm. Just real hard.
Just to get it down.
Just to get it down. And then I'll start slowing down and go into my cadence. So I'm always going to cast past where I want to go, because I want it to get down to the depth. I want it to be down to depth when it comes through where I want to fish the strike zone. So I'm going to throw it out there. I'm going to bomb it as far as I can. That's another thing with jerkbaits is a long cast is super important. Just like we were talking with deep crankbaits, keep making that long cast to be able to keep it in the strike zone as long as possible. So you make a long cast, crack it. Just crack it a few times to get it down, and then go into your whatever cadence that you want, because those first 3 will get it down quick, and then you go into whatever cadence is working for that day. Cadence that's another super important thing about jerkbaits is you can't just fish it the same way every time you go out.
Right.
Fish will they will change daily on how long you need to pause it, how fast you need to fish it, how hard you need to jerk it. All of these things, jerkbait fishing is not. It's not just as simple as throwing it out there and just cracking your rod in. To me anyway, like I have to, it usually takes me if I'm like, most of the time I'm not fishing jerkbaits in tournaments because I'm fishing in the wintertime and there's not really any tournaments around. But usually it'll take me, if I solid, hour, of fishing it to really figure out what cadence they want that day. Whether do they want a 5-second pause? Do they want a 20-second pause? I've had days where, you literally just let it sit. Like you throw it out there, switch it, and then just let it sit there. And if you think you let it sit long enough, just go smoke a cigarette, because, you want to let it sit. You just let it sit there, and you'll go to twitch it again and it just tightens up. Like you never feel it. You don't see the line. Like it's like in the wintertime, they'll just come up and they'll just grab it and they'll just sit there. It's weird. Like you won't see your line move. You won't see nothing. You'll just go to twitch it, twitch it again, and it just gets tight. It's like they don't even move with the bait. They just grab hold of it.
We'll go out and fish this winter.
I've caught a lot of fish on jerkbait in the wintertime on Upper Bay, and it's fun. It's one of my favorite ways to fish. That's why I like fishing in the wintertime so much. Jerkbaits and silver buddies.
That's a fun bite.
I can't wait to use
It's a
that
frustrating
Mega
bite.
Bass Dyna.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's super frustrating. You lose a lot of fish on blade bait.
Yes.
One thing I've noticed about jerkbaits is it seems
That's why I like
like
jerkbait fishing. I
when
don't lose a lot of fish.
when you're fishing around smallmouth, you can be a little bit more aggressive with the jerkbait
Yes.
versus when you're fishing around largemouth. Most of the time, that's why I like jerkbaits more for smallmouth. Is I usually like to catch a lot more fish on them because I like to work that jerkbait a little bit more aggressively. And it seems like I catch way more smallmouth than largemouth. Now, all the big fish I've ever caught on a jerkbait have been largemouth. I don't think I've ever caught a fish over. I don't think I've ever caught a smallmouth over 3.5 pounds on a jerkbait. But I've caught a lot of smallmouth on a jerkbait.
3.5
So
pound
that's a-
smallmouth to go smallmouth.
That's a really good point. I mean, that goes right along with our cadence talk here. Is you need typically you're going to have a much faster cadence for smallmouth. I mean, sometimes when I'm fishing a jerkbait for smallmouth, like my arm will be sore the next day because I mean it's literally as hard and fast as I can. I'm just steady cracking it, and that's a lot of times what they want, especially in the summertime for smallmouth when that water's warm.
Mhm.
You fish it as fast as possible. A good rule of thumb for jerkbait fishing is the warmer the water, the faster you need to work it. So if you're fishing for largemouth in the summertime, I mean, you might need to really crack it. I mean, think about it. You're fishing a square bill in the summertime. You're burning that thing, right? Same thing with the jerkbait. You might have to fish it fast. If I'm fishing, grass, and my paws might be, a second.
Mhm.
Now, as the water
Just
gets,
enough for that bait to float up a little bit or something, and then come back down again.
just a slight pause. If you get that slight pause, KVD, no matter what time of year he's fishing, he says he will not pause a jerkbait more than 1 second. He said if they're not going to eat it on a 1 second pause, they're not going to eat it on a 20-second pause.
It's crazy.
Which is,
But
I will say he's a much better fisherman than I am.
I
So
mean, we
I can't
also
doubt
go
him.
back at the same time, but when they're like, "Well, you just say just let go light a cigarette and let the jerkbait sit there."
I've found that to be successful. That what works for him might not work for me.
Right, right.
So there's different ways. There's different ways to be successful using the same technique.
I gotta disagree with KVD's statement on that.
I had a
Well,
day.
if you
like
think
that.
think about the way that he fishes, though. Like trolling, it doesn't matter what time of year. Trolling motor's on high. He's he's going to try to cover water and look for active fish. The fish that wants to eat right now. And even in the wintertime, like if that fish wants to eat, I mean, I've caught them on square bills and in 35-degree water.
KVD threw a jerkbait all year.
All year. Especially, he fishes up north a lot too. A lot of clear water, a lot of smallmouth. So he will throw a jerkbait all year for small. For some reason, a jerkbait is just a really good smallmouth bait all year, from cold water all the way into warm water, especially on those clear water lakes, and in rivers up north. Your St. Lawrence, and out in like KVD's world, you have St. Clair. St. Clair. So there's always a good jerk. You can always catch a bunch of jerk baits out there. It's just a different way, to catch smallmouth. Smallmouth are a lot more aggressive than largemouth. So they're gonna, they'll eat that jerk bait. You can be fishing just a regular Vision 110 over 15 feet of water, and they'll come off the bottom and just smoke it. Because you can see 20 feet, so like they see a minnow like hopping along the surface up there, and they're like, "Yeah, that's mine."
Yeah.
And they're going to come out of there. Where a largemouth is not typically going to move, in my experience anyway, is not going to move that far to eat a bait. It's waiting for that bait to come to them. So when it comes by them,
completely different predatory instincts.
Yeah.
Between the smallmouth and the largemouth.
So I think that's why, like Tony was saying, he's had a lot more success with smallmouth. It's just because smallmouth are more aggressive. They're more willing to chase that bait.
Right.
Where even, with largemouth, even crankbait fishing,
I mean,
how important
think-
is it?
I think pack hunting and smallmouth fishing is a lot more common than largemouth as well.
Yeah, especially around here,
Yeah.
because we don't get big schools. We don't get those big offshore schools of
Mhm.
largemouth. And even then, like if you have a big offshore school of largemouth, unless they're busting bait on the surface, you got to get your bait down to them.
Having a school of 5 smallmouth follow my glide bait back to the boat one day was one of the coolest experiences of my life. I was just sitting on the boat, throwing it, bringing it back, and then all of a sudden, like it got close to the boat, and these fish. It was really like one of the weirdest things ever. These fish just kind of appeared out of the depth, and there was just like 5 of them, dude, and they were like 6 inches away, just watching my bait come through the water.
We had that happen a lot on the St. Lawrence.
And then
you catch a fish, you catch a fish, and you're fighting it. We're throwing 6-pound line, so it takes a while to get it in.
Yeah.
And like eventually you get it close to the boat, and there's like 4 3-pound smallmouths just like chilling with it, like just following it around. Just waiting for it to like spit that bait out or something so they can snag it.
Right.
Would you argue that the jerkbait has a larger drawing power than a lot of other baits? I feel like I see a lot of fish on jerkbaits that I don't necessarily catch.
I don't think it has any more drawing power. I think if you're seeing fish that are not committing, you're throwing the wrong bait. It's as simple as that. I don't see any more fish on a jerkbait follow a jerkbait than I do having follow a crankbait or something like that.
Catch more fish on a crankbait because I throw a crankbait more than a jerkbait.
Well, again, a lot of it depends on. There's so many different scenarios that can affect it. So we could talk for 4 hours on the different scenarios and when to throw a jerkbait versus throwing a crankbait, but that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is to figure out what works for you.
Right.
So if you're more confident in a crankbait, you're probably going to catch more fish on a crankbait because you're going to not only you're going to throw it more, but you're going to throw it the right way. If you're not confident in a bait and you throw it out there, you're not going to play with different retrieves. You're not going to try to make it work.
Right.
You're just going to be like, they ain't biting this today, and pick up your crankbait and go back to it. And that's really what it takes for anything you don't have confidence in or any new technique is it takes time to fit. You have to build confidence in it. If you want to learn to fish any new technique, go out on the water. Don't take anything else. Force yourself to use that. Don't be afraid to blank.
Yeah.
You have to be committed to learning that technique. It's how I learned how to drop shot. When I first learned how to drop shot 10 years ago, it was, went out a couple days and just kind of played around with it. And me and my buddy said, we're gonna learn how to catch fish on a drop shot. We took 2 spinning rods each. They both had drop shots on them. That's all we fished for an entire 12-hour day on Conowingo. And we caught 1 fish. And then the next time, we did it again. And we caught 4 or 5 fish. And then by the 3rd time that we went out, we caught 25. It took time to build confidence in it. And then once we had you have that one good day on that bait, now you have confidence in that bait. Okay, well, I've just spent 36 hours fishing this one bait. It didn't work when I was throwing it in 3 foot of water, but when I was throwing in 20 feet of water, I was catching fish. So any new technique,
that's how I feel with my swim baits.
You throw them so much you have confidence in them.
I just throw them and I have confidence in them. I've caught so many fish on my 6-inch swim baits that at any given time I have no problem picking up a 6-inch swim bait and throwing it.
6-inch swim, yeah, I can. I'll pick up a 6-inch swim bait all the time. Yeah,
anywhere. I have no problems doing it.
I have no problem picking up if I'm out fishing grass, mag draft freestyle. I'll pull one out, no problem. If I think it's going to give me a bigger bite, or if it's just going to give me a bite in general. Sometimes it's just I've caught a lot of fish out of grass on a swim bait, so I have a lot of confidence in it.
When me and Bradley went out over the weekend, Bradley was flipping. He was throwing chatterbait. I threw a mag draft and a glide bait the whole time. and I caught the biggest fish, which was one of our bets. I did catch the biggest fish. Bradley caught one more fish than I did, one more bass than me. But I caught 2 to his 3, but both of mine were bigger. Actually, that's a lie. I'm sorry. The one I did catch was actually a dink. I threw the 6-inch mag draft, and I had like a 1.5 or a 2 pounder pick it up and eat it, which was funny.
I caught a ton of like 2 pounders on a 6-inch mag.
But dude, the 3 pounders, 3.5 pounders, 4 pounders, freaking love eating that mag draft.
Yeah, and it's just, and you have the confidence to throw it. Like, when I go out, if I'm fishing,
know how to use them and where to apply
exactly
them.
because you fish them so much.
Yeah.
That's the key to any bait is knowing where to throw it. You know that if you come up to a certain area that you're fishing, you can look at it and be like, that's not right for a swim bait. I'm going to throw a spinner bait or something else in there.
Right.
But when you get to that next area, I'm like, yeah, they'll eat a glide bait off this point. So knowing where to fish certain baits is always key. And I can tell you as much as I can about fishing and jerkbait. Nothing is going to be better. Oh, that was almost in my leg. Oh my, I'm dead.
The sharp hooks on them.
I love fishing.
So I can tell you as much as as every bit of every thought that's in my brain about fishing a jerkbait, and none of that will compare to just getting out in the water and fishing it.
Yep.
So, jerkbaits are awesome. Don't get me wrong.
One mission isn't going to do it either.
No.
2, 3, 4, 5 missions just throwing that jerkbait. That's what's going to do it.
And
you have to do it.
My wintertime fishing that I love to do on the Upper Bay, I can tell you, I had 7, 8, 9 trips zeroing on jerkbait before I figured out how to catch them on a jerkbait and the conditions that I needed to catch them on a jerkbait. I have very specific conditions I can catch them on a jerkbait in the wintertime. It took a lot of trips, 7, 8 trips of going out and knowing nothing but fishing a jerkbait. I mean, to be fair, going out in the wintertime, I'm fishing 40 degree and below water. There's not a ton of options on what you're going to fish.
Right.
I'm going to drag a jig. I'm going to drag a small football head jig. I'm going to throw a silver buddy. I'm going to throw a jerkbait. I'm not really throwing a lot of other baits. I mean, really just, I'm throwing 3 things.
Not even a rattle trap?
Sometimes I'll fish a rattle trap, depends on where I'm fishing.
I know where to fish a rattle trap in the winter.
But a lot of times if I'm fishing a rattle trap in the wintertime, I'm fishing like a silver buddy.
Yeah.
So, if I'm fishing like deeper wintering holes, that one specific area that you're talking about is a little bit different because they're actively feeding in the wintertime in that area. A lot of my wintertime fishing is just some wintering holes that I found that they just kind of chill. They're just kind of chilling there.
And they actively feed for like 30 minutes a day. And if you're there when it happens, you're going to have a fucking day.
I caught 17 fish in an hour and a half in 37 degree water. Yep. Just catching it on the right time, all on a jerkbait.
In the spot?
No.
Okay.
No, over in the Northeast.
Gotcha.
Just community wintering hole in the Northeast. Everybody knows that they winter there. I just hit it. I hit it at the right time, the right conditions. Fished an hour and a half. Caught 17 fish. My best 5 went 19 pounds.
That's
in 37 degree water. It was freaking awesome. I went out specifically that day to get some doing the whole confidence thing. I wanted to fish a silver buddy and get some confidence. I threw a silver buddy for 5 hours and never got a bite. After 5 hours, I'm like, yeah, I'm done with this. I just need to do something else. So I went over to another spot where I've caught fish in the wintertime before, tied on a jerkbait. Conditions were so for a jerkbait from what I thought. Second cast, I caught 4.5 pounder. I was like, okay. 2 casts later, caught another 4 pounder. And then it was just for straight for like an hour and a half until I left. I left them biting. I probably could have sat there and caught more, but it was just all on a jerkbait. I didn't throw anything else at them because I was catching fish every other cast. It's just that hour and a half. I caught 17 fish in an hour and a half. I was catching them like every other cast, but I was fishing so slow. Like one cast, it was like 4 minutes because
Yeah.
20 to 25-second pauses. When I was moving it, I was just going, dude, like just bumping it on a slack line and just letting it sit there and for 20, 25 seconds, and you go to bump it and it would just get tight.
How deep was it?
10 to 12.
Yeah, that's the thing about that wintertime fishing though, is like you could be I've twice now I've had over 20. So most of my 20-pound bags on the bay have come in like December, January. Crazy to think about that, right? Like I would say at least
Winter. That's not crazy. Wintertime's a great time to catch big fish because generally you're not going to get a lot of bites, but the bites that you do get are going to be quality bites.
Right. So both times I've caught 20 in that specific spot where you and I have fished before. I'll go out, I'll fish all day, right? I'll get there. First light that time of year is 7:30, 7 o'clock. Go out and fish all day, not catch shit, pull up on the spot just because, hey, this is a last ditch effort, and boom. Oh shit, here we go. And then you catch 20, 30 fish and you have a limit. Like the first time I fished with Chad, who I fished the Thursday nighters with, that's where we fished. And first time in my boat, by the way.
I'll tell you.
Fish the deep docks, fish the channel swings, fish the Susquehanna, fish the Clearwater, went over to this bullshit spot in 2 foot of water for no reason. First fish I catch is a 4.5 pounder. I'm like, holy crap. We sat in one spot, made the same cast for an hour and a half. And I mean, we easily caught like 25 fish a piece. Best 5 was about 24 pounds. Like it was insane.
I can pretty much duplicate that every time I go out now. It's all the time.
In the spot, we're going to have to talk after this.
Yeah.
But
I'll tell you.
Yeah, no, it's fun. It's so much fun. Like
I mean, you showed me the spot. Like I can't just like keep it from you. So
right.
But
I wasn't going to say that live, but anyway,
I'll show you. I'll tell you.
But not to get off topic, but
anyway,
wintertime is a fun time to fish. Like it sucks because it's cold, but like if you have a day, it's usually in the 20s, and maybe on a Saturday it's upper 30s, low 40s. Yeah, go out and fish.
If it's like 40 degrees and there's no ice on the water, like it hasn't been like super cold, and you have no ice on the water, just find a day when the wind's not blowing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that bad out.
No.
Like if it's 40 degrees, just layer up.
It's better if the sun's out.
If the sun's out, it's great. But as long as the wind's not blowing, it's not bad out there. That's really when it gets, wintertime fishing, it's miserable when the wind's blowing.
Yes.
Because it's just, you have that wind chill factor, and it just
cold as shit.
But it's not going to stop me. Like I'm still going out. As long as I fish year round, as long as there's no ice, I'm fishing. I'll have my boat out. I never winterize my boat. I caught a fish in all 12 months of last calendar year. From January.
That's hard to do.
I really struggled in February. I had a couple. I only got to make it out a couple of times up here, and it was there was a lot of ice, and stuff like that.
This last February was cold.
In the beginning of February, very cold. So this would have been last calendar year, so 2021.
That was even colder because I was up in Frostburg at the time.
It was cold. It was cold. It was cold around here. In February, I caught 2 actually on the 28th of February. That was the only bass that I caught in February. Caught them on the Potomac. I was pre-fishing for the tournament.
Made it happen.
We had an early March ABA on the Potomac, and I went down there. I was on the 28th of February. I went down to practice, and I caught a couple in February on the Potomac. Right out of Mattawoman. Surprisingly enough, in a 1.5 foot of water. 1.5 foot of water on spinnerbait in February.
Nice.
Like 42-degree water. Like fished all the normal stuff and this is kind of outside the jerkbait conversation, but in the wintertime, don't be afraid to fish shallow, especially in the tidal water. Like I've caught so many fish shallow in the wintertime. I mean, everybody knows if you watch any Mike Iaconelli video, you can catch them in 2 to 3 feet of water on Silver Lake in the Northeast all winter. So don't be afraid to fish shallow in the wintertime. I actually just listened to Jason Christie talking about, I watched a Bass University video talking about flipping. And in Oklahoma, in the wintertime, he said, as long as the water's up, if the water comes up and gets in the bushes in there, fish will be in those bushes and you can catch them flipping. Doesn't matter if the water, it doesn't matter that the water is only 40 degrees. They will be in those bushes and you can catch them flipping. So don't be afraid to fish shallow in the wintertime, and you can fish a jerkbait shallow. The 110 junior, that's a good like 3 foot range. But talking about fishing jerkbait shallow and different depths, one of the most important things with fishing jerkbait is your line.
Yes.
One, it has to be fluorocarbon. Do not fish
100%.
Do not fish a jerkbait on mono. Mono floats. It will throw off your action of your jerkbait, the suspension factor.
And don't fish it on braid.
Braid's the same way. Braid has no stretch. You'll bend hooks. Jerkbaits have very light wire hooks. No stretch on braid. You're gonna bend hooks. It doesn't work well. Plus the action. Jerkbaits, they kick side to side a lot, and they'll end up catching. They'll catch that braid because it's just not stiff enough. So even in the wintertime, I'm only fishing fluorocarbon. A lot of people switch to mono in the wintertime because fluorocarbon gets pretty stiff when it gets cold. I'm just fishing lighter fluorocarbon for the most part. Now, so we said fluorocarbon. We've talked about this multiple episodes. Line size will determine the depth that your bait runs. If you need your bait to run a little deeper, drop down to 10. I generally fish, so just as a standard, I generally fish jerkbaits on 12-pound fluorocarbon. Like almost, I'd say, 75% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
If I need it to run a little bit deeper, I'll drop down to 10. I don't really go lower than 10, just because I break too many off. When I go down to 8,
Yeah,
I
10
break
is
too
as
many
low
fish.
as I go for anything when it comes to fluorocarbon.
Now, I mentioned this earlier in the episode.
They're like 6, don't you?
Yeah, at times. Rarely though. Not really anymore. But when I fished the reservoirs, yeah, I did.
So I found out in Texas this year that you can fish a Vision 110 in 2.5 feet of water, throw it on 17-pound line. We were fishing this one little area. It's like, it was like 3.5 to 4 feet where the boat was sitting, and I caught one on a shaky head up against the bank, and the water was still pretty cool. It was in the low 60s, and I looked at my buddy and I was like, wonder if I can get me a jerkbait. So like I threw it out on my normal jerkbait rod, and I'm like, well, yeah, this sucks. Because I'm like just dragging bottom and pulling up and stuff like this. So I cut my jerkbait off, pulled out my plastics rod that was rigged up with 17-pound fluorocarbon, 7-1 medium heavy rod, tied that Vision 110 on there, threw it right over next to the bank, boom, 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 3-pounder. 2.5 feet of water, never touched the bottom. It actually, raised it up off the bottom that much that I could fish it in, 2.5 to 3 feet of water, no problem. Just by throwing it on 17-pound fluorocarbon. Didn't affect the action. Yeah, action was still good. Now I throw a pretty high quality fluorocarbon. I do recommend that with your jerkbaits because you want something that's a little supple. That's not real stiff like some of the inexpensive stuff like Seaguar Red Label. I throw a lot of crankbaits and stuff like that on Red Label, but for a jerkbait I can't throw it. It's just it's too stiff. So I throw Invis-X, Seaguar Invis-X, Seaguar. I only throw Seaguar. So whatever your fluorocarbon of choice is, if it might, it may be Sunline. Sunline makes a really good fluorocarbon. Seaguar, whatever your fluorocarbon is.
Spider wire.
Throw a higher end fluorocarbon. I'm not saying you got to throw a Tatsu. I will not throw a Tatsu. I can't pay $40 a spool for line that I swap out every 2 weeks. Just not gonna. It's not very cost effective. Like I'd have to sell my house. So
that shit's expensive.
Control your depth with your line. We talked about that with crankbaits. Crankbaits, it's a little easier to control your depth with a crankbait because obviously you can reel a little bit slower to get a little bit shallower. You can reel a little bit faster, and you can get a little bit deeper. With jerkbaits, you can't really do that. They're going to get to a certain depth, and that's kind of where they're going to like to run.
Yep.
They're going to like to run on that certain depth. Whereas like with a square bill, if I reel a square bill kind of slow and keep my rod tip up, I can run it a little shallower, or I can pull my rod tip down and run it a little deeper. I can't really do that with the jerkbait because you're working it with the rod. Every bit of action from your jerkbait should come from your rod, not your reel.
Mm-hmm.
So you're always working it with your rod, so you can't do that whole hold my rod tip up high to run a little shallower or down a little lower. It's a little harder to do that with a jerkbait. So line size is really important to get the correct depth. The other thing is, again, carrying a variety of jerkbaits, because 1 foot of running depth can make a difference. So if I'm running my Vision 110 and I'm getting it down to like 4 feet, and that zone's just not working. But this 110 plus is going to go 6 or 7 feet. Well, I'm missing that 3 foot of there's 3 foot of water in between that I'm missing. That could be the right zone. So if I try this, okay, that doesn't work. Okay, I tried the 110. Oh, that's still not working. Well, all right. Well, I'm gonna try the 6 cents. The 6 cents runs a little bit deeper than a megabass, than a Vision 110. So this runs, I usually get these down to like 5.5, something like that. So it's a little bit deeper than my Vision 110, not quite as deep as my 110 plus, and I'm hitting a whole nother zone. That's why I said earlier in the show, it's important to have a variety of jerkbaits, because you need to be able to cover those different water columns. And when you're out fishing, you don't want to have to change your line. Now, if I find out that they're eating, they're eating in that 5.5 foot range, I'll just go respool my, if I want to really think that Vision 110 is going to be the key, I'll go respool my rod, before the tournament or something like that. And I'll fish the Vision 110 on maybe 10-pound line and to get it down to that depth. If I think that's going to be if I think that they're going to eat that better, because they always have different actions. So, and it's always important to pay attention to how the fish is eating your jerkbait. If you're hooking a lot of fish on the outside of the mouth, if you're hooking them on the back hook, you may need to make a change. Now, what kind of change? That's
Color.
It's situational. Could be color, could be depth, could be your retrieve speed, could be but you need to make some sort of change. So it's always important. And again, we talked about that with crankbaits too. You always have to play around with your retrieve until you get it dialed in. When you get it dialed in, even in the wintertime, when they're not really, when they're lethargic and they're not really eating, if this is their mouth, it'll be crossways in their mouth. If they start eating it like this, and when you're reeling them in, it's that jerkbait's crossways in their mouth, you're onto the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you're reeling them in, they're barely hooked on the back, on that back hook, or they're hooked on the outside of the mouth.
They swiped it.
They swiped at it. They didn't really commit to it. You might need to change your color. You might need to slow down a little bit. You might need to speed up a little bit. You might need to change the depth a little bit. Maybe you need to make it run a little deeper, or maybe a little shallower. It could be that it was just, it was coming, the fish is at this level, bait was coming by and they swiped at it. Whereas if you get it up about 6 inches and they can really see it, then they eat it. So a lot of all of that makes a difference in jerkbaits. Jerkbaits are not an easy thing to master, because there are a lot of really fine details that go into jerkbait fishing. It's not like crankbait. Crankbait fishing is, as far as a hard bait technique, relatively easy. Throw it out, crank it in. Obviously, retrieve speeds and things like that. But for the most part, you have a crankbait, it runs 6 foot deep. If I want something to run shallower, I change to a crankbait that runs 4 feet deep. Jerkbaits, they vary so much. And, it's, if you look at any jerkbait package, it'll say 4 to 7 feet. Well, I know a DT10 runs 10 feet. This runs 4 to 7. Does it run 4 feet, or does it run 7 feet?
Right.
And you really have to figure out how to get it from that. What makes it run 4 feet? What makes it run 7 feet? So super, there's a lot of really fine details to jerkbait fishing. But once you figure it out, it's super fun. It's a really fun way to catch fish. I really enjoy it because you can have some really good days in the wintertime. When my favorite part about fishing in the wintertime is I'm the only bass boat on the water usually.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to, there's nobody in the parking lot. I don't have to worry about anybody else being out on the water. It's just, I can just be out there. It's quiet. And you can go out, throw a jerkbait for hours and catch them, or throw a jerkbait for hours and not catch them, which you will have to do a few times to really learn fishing jerkbaits. It's just, again, there's a lot of really fine details that go into fishing jerkbaits, and we've touched on a lot of those tonight. The biggest thing is, if you're going out to throw a jerkbait, if what you're doing is not working, change location, change the depth, change your retrieve speed, change something, but don't, what do they say? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. You have to change something. Like I said, you might be location. Maybe you're just not fishing in the right area. So maybe change the location. Now I've changed a couple locations. I'm still not getting bit. What am I going to just keep throwing the same jerkbait? No, I'm try a different color. If you notice, I have a pretty large variety. All of my jerkbaits are going to be, they're bait fish colored. I don't fish any like crawl colored jerkbaits or anything like that. I don't even do that in the springtime. Like, I'm always fishing a bait fish color. But if the sun's out, I might throw, and the water's clear, I'm going to throw something like this, which you can see it up there. You can see that. I mean, it's clear. So sun's out, throwing something clear. Sun's not out, I'm going to throw something that's a more opaque color. And that's just a starting point. Like, that, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to catch them on this jerkbait. Tony's over here breaking pens. That doesn't mean I'm not going to catch them on this jerkbait when it's cloudy out. But I'm going to start here, and then I'm going to fish it. And if I'm not getting bit, I'm going to change. That's what I'm trying to beat into your guys' heads is you have to change. You have to always be changing until you find that right bait. The same thing goes with crankbait fishing. Don't just keep throwing. If you're not getting bit on a crankbait and you just keep throwing a crankbait, you're probably going to continue to not get bit.
Yep.
But if you change your retrieve, or you change the color, or you change the depth, you're eventually you're going to figure out what you need to do to get bit. Same thing goes with jerkbaits. The starting tips that I'll give you, is, if it's a cloudy day, throw something more opaque. If it's sunny, throw something clearer. Clear the water, clear the jerkbait. Dirty water, maybe throw something. This one's got a nice little chartreuse belly. If the water's a little stained, that's, that little chartreuse belly is kind of nice. I do like, I don't know if any of you guys noticed that a lot of my baits have a kind of an orange belly.
An orange or like a chartreuse belly.
I like that orange belly on those clearer baits. I feel like it gives them a little something to hone in on. It's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like even this one. It's a little orange on the belly there.
Yeah, I agree. I think orange is always a good idea, no matter what. Especially on tidal water, orange is always a good idea.
Yeah, and if you think about it, fishing in the wintertime, you're going to snag a lot of gizzard shad. There's always gizzard shad around in the wintertime. Like, if you're not around gizzard shad, you're probably not catching fish. And you're going to end up snagging a lot of gizzard shad. And if you look at gizzard shad, they always have like a pinkish orange tint to them in the wintertime, like on their bellies. And I think that's a lot of the reason why that orange belly works so well, is because the gizzard shad just kind of get that like pinkish, orangish, reddish kind of tint to them. And it just makes it look that much more natural, because I'm not 100% certain on it, but I feel like in the wintertime on the Upper Bay and on the Potomac for sure, a lot of those fish, they're eating gizzard shad because it's wintertime. They don't want to expend a lot of energy. Those bigger fish can eat one gizzard shad, or they chase down 15 threadfin. Like, it doesn't make sense to fish, for a fish to eat a bait this big when they have bait this big all around them. I can have the fish could eat once during that day, or it could have to feed twice, and it has expend a lot more energy to get those. And there are differing viewpoints on that as well. It takes more, it takes more metabolism to digest those bigger baits and then the smaller baits and stuff like that. Honestly, I think a bass in the wintertime is going to eat regardless of the size. If something comes by their face, they're going to eat it. If they don't have to expend a lot of energy to get it, they're going to eat it. So, jerkbaits. Mostly for me, it's mostly a wintertime thing. However, I have been able to fish them with some success throughout the summer, fishing them around grass, deeper, channel swings and creek channels, things like that in some of the various lakes in the summertime when the fish get out on those. I've had a little bit of success with doing that, but most of my success has been early spring, late fall, and then dead of winter. So anytime from November to the end of March, I will have a jerkbait on my deck 100% of the time. Doesn't matter where I'm at.
I always have a jerkbait tied on.
I always have them tied on because I see certain situations sometimes when I'm out fishing that I'm like, jerkbait might work.
Sometimes when I see like little bait shad like busting on the surface being chased, I'll throw a freaking a Vision 110 Junior out there and erratically work it, try to get the bait or something.
Just pop it onto it, especially like you said, if you're in in the forbidden zone or something where those fish do suspend a lot. Especially in the summertime, and they start banging bait. Conowingo, another good example. If you're out in the middle, you could be out in the middle of the lake. I mean, like dead smack in the middle, and there's nothing around you. And smallmouth will just start busting on bait. You're a half a mile from the shore on either side. There's nothing, no structure around, but they're just following the schools of bait around. And you can fire, you may fire a topwater over there and you might be able to catch them. But if those fish are still there, you can throw a jerkbait in there sometimes too. That's really good in the wintertime. So, there's different applications for a jerkbait. And like I was saying, just take your time, go out and just learn it. And until you get a few bites, that's really what it's going to take. And once you start getting a few bites, just start putting the pieces together. I'm like, okay, well, it worked when I did this here. Let me try doing this on, and let's say that was on rock. Okay, well, let me try fishing that on, a sandy point. Well, okay, well, that didn't work there. So, maybe the jerkbait's just good for those rocky areas. In different times of the year, you're going to have different areas to fish and different places that a jerkbait's going to be useful. And really just getting out there and learning it. Like I said, I can't tell you every situation because there's just too many to name. There's a lot of really weather dependent, water temperature, wind, a lot of those things. If the wind's blowing in the springtime and you don't have a jerkbait tied on, you're doing something wrong.
Yep.
Because you will crack them if the wind's blowing on a jerkbait in the springtime, especially in that pre-spawn.
Yep.
So, for the Upper Bay, for example, pre-spawn is going to be usually from the first week of April sometimes. So think of beginning of April to the end of April. that real hard pre-spawn time. You get some you get some wind on some rock, and you can crack them on a jerkbait. It's a good time, but it sometimes if it's slick, just because it's slick out doesn't mean you can't catch them on a jerkbait. It's really just you gotta gauge.
Play with it.
You gotta gauge the fish's mood.
Play with how you jerk it. See how you like it.
True. True.
All right. Well,
That's all I have.
yeah,
That's all I have for jerkbaits.
yeah. We're at the hour and 15-minute mark tonight, and we talked quite a lot about jerkbaits. There is still more information to give, as there is on every single bait that we talk about. You can always wrap around and talk about them. But yeah, that's what we're doing on jerkbaits tonight. Go out there, tie one on, throw it, test it out. It's a killer bait. It's a bait that can be utilized in a lot of different ways, and
It's a fun way to catch them. It's fun.
it is. It's a very fun, active way to catch them, and it's definitely a way, a bait that you should have in your tackle for sure. Don't sleep on the jerkbait.
And you don't have to. And everybody will tell you. If you read forums, Megabass is the best one out there. Megabass is the best one out there. If you don't want to buy a Megabass, don't buy a Megabass. You can catch fish on. I throw this 6 cents a lot. It will catch fish. Caught a lot of fish on Shadow Rap. It'll catch fish. Lucky Craft Pointer, classic jerkbait. $10 less than a Megabass. You're looking at $15 for that. So just because everybody says fish a Megabass doesn't mean you have to go out and buy 50 Megabass jerkbaits.
You don't have to.
If you want to, by all means, they're fantastic jerkbaits. Go right ahead. But don't think that you need to spend a fortune to successfully catch fish on a jerkbait. You don't need to. Spro stick, great jerkbait. Spro stick runs about $12. It's a great jerkbait. Like we mentioned earlier, Shadow Rap is like $9.
Mm-hmm.
I've caught a ton of fish on Shadow Rap. The Berkeley Stunner, that is a pretty good jerkbait. It did win a classic, so or helped win a classic at least.
Good jerk. Hank Cherry Classic.
Yeah, the second one. And so these are $12 or $13. So I don't think you have to. I just want to throw that out there. Just you don't have to spend a fortune to get into it. Buy a couple stunner. Get yourself at least one Megabass because they are fantastic jerkbaits. Get a couple different kinds. Go out, play around with them. If you're like me, I buy 2 of everything that I buy because
Keep fishing them.
I'm always scared that I'm going to break something off, and that's going to be like what's catching fish.
Mm-hmm.
That's my biggest fear in fishing is that I'm going to be catching them on a bait, and I'm going to break it off, and that's the only bait that'll leave that. So anytime I buy a bait, it doesn't matter if it's the only thing that I haven't done that on is glide baits because I can't afford to do that.
Right.
But like jerk baits, crankbaits, anything, I always buy at least 2 of that color. So, but anyway, that's just a crazy side note for me. But I will leave you guys with that.
Yep. We are tuning out. Thank you guys for tuning in with us tonight, and we will catch you guys on Friday.
Have a great night, everyone.